In class, you were talking about the most effective takedown strategy in wrestling, in collegiate wrestling. So maybe let me ask first, because we offline talked about this too. What is the highest percentage submission in grappling?
Overall, you have to go with the rear naked strangles from the back. If you look at most tournaments and most rule sets, it has success across all rule sets, all weight divisions, all body types. It doesn't require any kind of specific physical advantage, such as height, in order to be effective. It works equally well in both fighting and grappling. It will work regardless of how physically and mentally tough your opponent is. Okay, a heel hook is a very high percentage technique in modern day competition. But if your opponent simply makes up his mind that he's just not going to tap and is willing to take the physical damage, it won't result in the end of a match. A stranglehold, by contrast, will always end a match, regardless of your opponent's mental toughness. So I believe it's fair to say that at the end of the day, the single most high percentage method of submitting people in grappling is the rear naked strangle.
So when you look at an athlete, maybe Gordon, you could speak to this. Like, what's the best? You mentioned Gary with the guillotine. What's the best submission to really invest in? Is it the rear naked choke? To really invest your development, like understanding the entirety of the system that leads into that?
I think that, I mean, you have to do them all, obviously, but if I had like one submission only one submission I could pick for the rest of my life, it would definitely be a rear naked.
Can you explain maybe some of the actual technical details of why that's the case?
Well, as John spoke about, they're different in joint locks, whereas you don't have to tap. You can just let your leg break and then keep going with the strangle. There's none of that. And then it's just an inherent advantage you have being behind someone. Whereas if you go for an armbar, you start from top mount and you're facing the guy, and then you put him down and you're not directly behind him. With leg locks, you're facing the guy. Whereas when you're on someone's back, you have them in a pin where you can, your chest to back, you have a body triangle in, you're pinning the guy in place. He can't explode out. He can't grease his way out most of the time. And there's an inherent advantage you have being behind them due to the fact that we're poorly set up to deal with threats behind us.
So would you say that's the most dominant position in jiu-jitsu, like more than mount, more than side control, more than...
I think if you look at most matches historically, most guys who get stuck in positions for long amounts of time are guys with their back taken. If you get an explosive guy from bottom mount, he can bridge and he can off balance you and lock half guard maybe and then work back to guard. But if someone locks a body triangle on your back, that's where you see most guys getting pinned in place for long amounts of time.
Was the body triangle like a well understood thing? Was that an invention at some point, like as a system, as a control position?
Perhaps some of your listeners can correct me on this, but I believe there was a technique banned in judo called dojime, which involved crossing feet or locking a triangle around the abdominals from the back. And it was banned in judo, I believe, because of intestinal injuries, which occurred in the early developmental days of judo. And in the modern era, when I first began jiu-jitsu, body triangles were relatively rare. They were not a standard part of class. And sometime around the late 1990s, early 2000s, people started to realize, hey, this is a stronger method of control. It greatly increases the amount of control you have of your opponent's hips and torso over regular hooks. It's not for all athletes. It's difficult for most people who are of shorter, thicker stature to employ on big people. If your opponent's very broadly built through the stomach, it's almost impossible to apply. And so because it can't be applied by all people, it tends not to be taught much at beginner level. So as a result, it was always seen as a kind of a specialist move for taller athletes at a higher level of competition, rather than a broad-based move for everyone or every body type in every class to employ. So it just didn't get emphasized that much. But in top-level competition now, I think you would see that it's very apparent that the vast majority of athletes, whenever they have the opportunity or a choice between body triangle and regular rear mounts, the majority of modern athletes would choose a body triangle.
So we also had this conversation about wrestling. Maybe George, you can comment on like what's the highest percentage, not statistically speaking. Perhaps that's also interesting, as John talked about. But just for you, in terms of mastery of a takedown, what's the best way to take down a human being in wrestling?
Well, I personally, for me, it depends. For every fighter are different. They have a different set of skill. For me, when I look someone who want to bring down a tree, a big, strong, high tree, he cut it from the base. So the legs, that's what we stand on. So it was to attack the leg.
But is it single leg, double leg? Is it we talked about like well, there's also the John Smith low single. Which, actually, I don't even know if that's applicable for jiu-jitsu at all.
You can use it, but it runs into the problem with submission holds. Yeah. It's not impossible to use, but without shoes and in a situation where there's a whole plethora of submission holds and the scoring, it's a little more difficult to use. Yeah.
It is interesting. Something being a high percentage in terms of effectiveness tells a story. You're saying that every athlete is different, but if it's more effective for most people, I mean, it's interesting. It's interesting. What John talked about is that the highest percentage thing is actually in collegiate wrestling that he was talking about is on the defensive side. So blocking a takedown and then spinning around to the back. So that's an interesting idea. Then also there's all of these kind of going in for a single and then switching to a double or wizard position and doing knee tap. Like there's all these kinds of combinations that seem to be effective when you look at the statistics. And it seems like there's maybe it's a scientific way of thinking, but it seems like there is some conclusion to be drawn there.
Oh yeah, I believe you need to the high percentage move. There's a reason why it works. I think it's made for a bigger amount of people. For example, I one of my main strength, athletic strength, is I'm an explosive person. So I'll use technique that are explosive. If I got a single leg, my one of my thing I like to do is to go for the double, power double. But for someone else who got, for example, in a single leg position, maybe he likes like body throw better. He's more a Greco guy, like or he's a judo guy. He's gonna go for something else. So, but there's moves that are, I would say, like you just mentioned, are universal. Like statistically speaking, they're the highest percentage move that works for pretty much everybody. Everybody pretty much can do an adaka jimmy. You know, it's very easy. But it's not everybody that can lock a triangle with their legs. So those move like a rear naked choke. Adaka Jimmy is the highest percentage move because it's maybe more accessible. It's accessible for a bigger range of
based
people.
on the physical characteristics of the people. Do you draw any wisdom from these high percentages, John, for like in terms of what to focus on?
Yeah, absolutely. Jiu-jitsu has an ocean of moves, and you can get lost on that ocean. You can drift for a long period of time and end up with very little to show for it. Yeah. So my whole thing is focus. We only live one lifetime, and your training lifetime is even shorter than your actual lifetime. So in that time,
unless you die on the mat.
That's true.
The same.
I put a very high value on choosing what I believe to be the most high percentage moves and putting an extraordinary amount of focus on them. The only problem is that in one generation, a move which can be considered low percentage might actually turn out to be high percentage in another generation. For example, we talked earlier about leg locks. When I was first started jiu-jitsu, they were considered the ultimate low percentage move. And a big part of my career has been convincing people that, in fact, that was incorrect, that they can be a high percentage move if we just change our approach to them. So we can't just follow tradition and say, oh, this is low percentage or this is high percentage. It has to be part of a fairly systematic study where you investigate what are the reasons why it's high percentage or low percentage. With regards to takedowns, if you look at what we can consider the most high percentage takedowns, if you're in front of someone, the single most high percentage way of taking them down is to get a hold of both of their legs and push them backwards. Okay, if you get a hold of one of their legs and put a force on them, they can use their other leg to defend themselves and hop around and funk their way out of takedowns and cause all kinds of problems for you. I don't care how athletic your opponent is. If you get a hold, a firm grip of both of his legs and start pushing him backwards, he's going to fall down to his butt. Now, he might be able to recover from there, but he will fall down. Even easier than that is to be behind someone. Takedowns from in front of someone are difficult. You go right into their hips, their head, their hands, you go into all their defensive weapons. If you're already behind someone and you're doing what in America they would refer to as a mat return, this is significantly easier than taking someone down from the front. If you have control of their head in a front headlock position, you've already closed distance on your opponent. You already have close contact. You don't have to worry about shooting anymore. There's no sprawl out of that. You don't have to worry about guillotines, kimuras, or the standard defenses. Those will intrinsically be easier takedowns out of front headlock. And so if we're going to talk about high percentage technique, I always go back to the mechanics of it rather than just historical tradition, because historical tradition can be wrong. It was wrong about leg locks. It can be wrong about other things too. So my primary thing is, okay, talk to me about mechanics. That's what ultimately is going to determine whether something is high percentage or not. Gordon pointed out earlier that when you're behind someone, you have innate physical advantages over the other guy. The human body is set up entirely to defend threats from the front. We are poorly adapted to defending threats from the rear. We don't have eyes in the back of our head. We can't apply pushing strength backwards. If you get behind someone, takedowns are 10 times easier from behind someone than they are when you're in front of someone. If you have to take someone down from the front, get a hold of both of their legs. If you can get a hold of both of their legs and impart a pushing force, you will almost always knock them down. If you can get a hold of their head and work takedowns from there, again, it's much easier because most of their defensive apparatus has been taken away from them before the takedown even begins. And so for me, the most high percentage takedowns will always be from the front, double legs. From any takedown from the back is going to be significantly easier than any takedown from the front. So all manner of mat return takedowns are going to be very high percentage. And takedowns done out of situations where the opponent is broken down in front of you and you have either front headlock or front chest wrap position are going to be significantly easier than takedowns from the open.
Of course, you have to consider the full spectrum of mechanics involved here. It's possible that an outside low single leading to a double leg is much higher percentage. It's like there's a lot of chain wrestling yet, that needs to be considered as a possibility. Maybe a straight on double. And part of this cultural too. Are people afraid of this kind of thing? That they came to be the case with leg locks. Are people aware of this? Are they worried about this? Are they training for this to defend this? And then it's opponent specific, of course, that, with Jordan Barros, people were preparing for the double, which is why he had to develop a whole other kinds of different stuff. And then the head to all the different controls, all the different ties within the rule set. And that's where it's so fascinating to see the effect of rule set and all of this. Judo over the past, I think, 20 years went through this every Olympics, different changes to the rule set, like fundamentally different in terms of what's allowed to grip, whether you're allowed to touch the legs at all. That was a big one in 2012, I think. And that changed the sport completely. And so interesting. It's so interesting to watch how a tiny change in the rule can change the sport at the highest, when you're talking about people competing at the highest level. And the cool thing there is the rule change happens on a scale of every 4 years. So you get to see people that are at the top of their game have to recompute. So it's not like you have a new generation of people coming up with the rules. They have to figure, oh shit, you're not allowed to, it's the equivalent of saying you're not allowed to kick anymore in MMA. Because you were not allowed to grab legs anymore in judo.
Interestingly, if you look at the case of judo, if you look at the world rankings of athletes, when they went through one of the most significant rule changes in judo history, where they banned any form of grabbing the legs, the ranking of athletes didn't change much.
Yeah, that tells you that
there's a reason why those guys are at the top.
Yeah. And it doesn't have to do that they're specific to a rule set.
Yeah. Think about that in terms of, imagine, for example, in mixed martial arts, if they just said, hey, starting next week, instead of having 3 5-minute rounds, it's going to be 15 minutes straight. That would massively change the preparation of the athletes. It's a different game at that point. And judo literally was a different game before 2010 and after 2010. And yet, the international rankings didn't really change that much. The countries that were dominant before remain dominant. The athletes that remained before largely remain the same. You would think with such a massive change, all the rankings would have been thrown upside down, but they weren't. And again, it goes back to this idea that there's a reason why the guys at the top are at the top.
Welcome to Mastering the Move, the knee cut guard pass. When it comes to selecting methods of guard passing, there are some clear criteria that might influence our decision. The goal of this video is to show how knee cut guard passing can in most cases be reduced to a pretty simple 3-part structure. First, gain an advantageous start position. Second, control opposite shoulder and hip, usually via underhook control on the far side of the body and good knee position on the near side. Third, control the outcome, usually via head position, and the fact that the opponent has very little purchase on the knee cutting leg. The knee cut has always been among the most successful and practical guard passes in Jiu-Jitsu. It is a staple among my students, and I am very confident that it will get great results for you too.